For a while, we didn't, because one of the
Yeah.
things about this faith is that former members or people who leave, family usually shuns you. They cut you off. And she did do that for
Mm.
quite a while with me. But within the past year and a half, we reconnected and we're getting along pretty well. I didn't want to live under that pressure anymore. I didn't want to pretend anymore. I was getting tired of those weekend programming sessions, especially the longer ones, because the ones we had in Monroe were short, even though they were weekend long.
Hello and welcome back to this channel. My name is Miriam Vidal, and on this channel I explore topics that interest me as a Jewish American YouTuber from a Hasidic background with a great love for understanding human nature and sociology. I do video essays as well as interviews. When I was a Hasidic child in the Hasidic village of Kiryas Joel, there was an incredibly weird building behind my childhood home. We called it the church. Every Saturday, rows of cars came to the church. We Hasidic kids would stand at the gate at our backyard and watch or wave to the rows of cars. Only as an adult, after leaving the Hasidic community, did I learn that the building was actually a Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. And as someone fascinated by religious subcultures, I really wanted to learn more. Fortunately, I heard from Miriam Vidal, who once was a Jehovah's Witness member and would attend the very Kingdom Hall that was behind my home. Miriam agreed to do this conversation where I learned about her experiences and her faith and her memories. I'm so looking forward to understanding the story that little me in my Shabbos dress and Shabbos shoes waving away never could. Before we dive in, I want to thank all the channel members who have helped make this time-consuming and labor-intensive work possible. Thank you to all of you. And thank you to Miriam, and hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm so happy you reached out. I think what started our connection was a blog post I wrote where I showed some pictures of the so-called church, or we called it in Yiddish the Tifla. Can you tell us which years you attended that Kingdom Hall?
I remember at my earliest, it was around 1980 and all the way through 1997, thereabouts, I attended that particular convention center. It was really a convention center, not your average weekly Kingdom Hall where the normal routine meetings took place. This was a place that was set apart specifically for 1 or 2 day conventions that were usually on the weekends.
I see. Can I ask? I'm trying to figure out how old you would have been at that time. Can I ask when you were born? Which year?
I was born in 75, so I
So you were a
started.
young child.
Yes, I started going when I was 5 years old, that I remember at the earliest, all the way through my early adult years, 20, 21, 22.
I see. Were you born into the faith?
Yes, I was. My mom was a convert, but she converted shortly before I was born.
Did she have other kids besides?
She just had me and then a younger brother. He was born 5 years after I was. So it was just us two. My father had other children from previous marriages, but altogether there's 10 siblings. But from my mom, it's just me.
Wow.
Yeah, so I could relate. You have a big family too. I get that. Yeah. So I come from a
Wow,
pretty large
incredible.
family. Yeah. But with my mom, it's just me and my younger brother. That's it.
Was your dad married to your mom when you were a child?
Yes, they were. He was never a part of that faith. Sometimes he would participate. He would go to some meetings, special events, but he was never a member.
They allowed that?
Yeah, it's actually quite common because most people in that faith, usually, especially adults, they go in as converts. So if they're married, already married, the faith doesn't discourage you from getting a divorce. They definitely don't encourage that. So there are rare occasions where both a husband and a wife may join together, but it's not that common. I think in all the years that I've been a member, I only saw maybe one husband and wife come in together.
Wow. Do you know what made your mother become a convert?
She had a lot of questions that she felt her original faith. I think she was raised as a Catholic. She felt that they didn't answer. So when a missionary visited her, from the JWs, she found a couple of answers that she wanted, I guess, and just took it from there and dove in deep.
Wow. Do you have a relationship with her today?
I do. I do. It's sometimes a little strained, but we do get along. For a while, we didn't, because one of the things
Yeah.
about this faith is that former members or people who leave, family usually shuns you. They cut you off. And she did do that for quite a
Mm.
while with me. But within the past year and a half, we reconnected and we're getting along pretty well.
Can I ask, do you have children or a partner?
I do not at this time. I'm divorced, but I've had no children.
So if when you did have a partner, you didn't like, did you get married without your mother attending the wedding? I'm just curious about to which degree she was not in your life.
That happened after I left. So I was around 22 years old, I think, when I left, and then I got married a couple of years later at 25. I had a very small, modest wedding. Really, it was just going to City Hall and then a little dinner at my apartment. She was a part of that. She did attend. You know, the shunning had more to do with like if I wanted to invite her to my house for dinner, she would not go. Um, Phone calls. I would
Interesting.
call her more often than she called me. And then it was a period of time for like a year where she didn't call me at all unless I called her. And then I said, well, I'm not going to
Wow.
call her because why am I always reaching out? I didn't do anything wrong. So we spent maybe a good year not even talking at all.
Wow.
Until, I finally did. I reached out and then we got to talking again. And I believe the organization itself has, I don't know for sure because it's been so long since I walked away. I don't know what their current doctrine or policy is on that. But rumor has it that they kind of relaxed those regulations about former
Oh,
members that, if it's an immediate family member, you could reach out to that person, a daughter, a child, a parent, uh, that it's okay, that there's really no in writing policy against it, although years ago there were, and I remember. So
very interesting. Do you talk to your mother openly about her faith?
I do not. It's actually it's a little bit awkward to talk to her about it because she's
Yeah.
always trying to get me to see only her way and try to get me to join again, and that's just not happening. So
Yeah.
as long as we don't talk about those things, we pretty much talk about everything else and leave it at that.
Got it. I asked these questions because I just was trying to understand to which degree you have her oral history, because obviously you as a young child going to the assembly hall in Kiryas Joel are just clueless. You're a young little kid. She's the one who's engineering all this by making these decisions, which of course are very large decisions, but sometimes it can be really hard to talk about such things with loved ones or with family members when you diverge in paths so much.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. And it's sort of like it's like a fluid thing. I'm still going through it, and coming to terms with things that and my own issues that I had about being brought up that way. Just earlier today I was watching an interview on another channel, a young woman who spent years faking it, pretending that she was all in when she was really just trying to find a way to escape because you can't just walk out. It's one
It
of
was
those
also
things.
JW.
Yeah, yeah, she was. And
Mm.
it's one of those things that if you're in it, you can't just walk away. You can't just decide one day, hey, I don't think I believe anymore, or I don't want to be a part of this. It's pretty traumatic. So,
Yeah.
she spent years, and that's something I couldn't do. You know, I looked at her and I said, wow, that took a lot of strength. I couldn't do it. Me, I just said when I decided I didn't want to be a part of it no more, I had to make a clean break and announce it and say I'm done, and then just deal with whatever came up after that.
So you want to tell me what it was like to be in the church as a young child? Did your mom missionize?
She didn't really, um, in part because of my father's influence, since he wasn't really a member. There were just things that she wasn't, I don't want to say she wasn't allowed to do, but she didn't have access to do. She didn't have the possibility to do. She didn't drive up to a certain point. She didn't have control over her own finances, there were just things she couldn't do. In
Why
her heart,
didn't she drive?
I think she was just fearful for a while, but then she eventually got over that fear. And she also, when I was very young, she wasn't working outside of the home. So, my father had the car and, whatever she needed, he took care of. So it was a little bit more traditional in that sense.
So how was your life different did you go to public school?
I did. I did. I always went to public school.
So how was by the way, are you working at a public school now?
Yeah, well, I'm working at the school district, so I work in the administration. I'm not a teacher or
Ah, I
anything.
see.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I understand. Okay. So, when you went to public school as a child, how was your childhood different from public school kids that are not in the JW faith?
I did not know there was a difference, but I learned very quickly that there was because on I guess my first week of school in kindergarten, I'm just a kindergarten kid going to school. And then one day, I don't know at what point, it must have been in the first week or two of the school year. At that time, we recited the Pledge of Allegiance. And I went ahead and did it because, and the teachers are showing you, put your hand over your heart, say these words. I don't know how my mom found out. I don't know if I had told her myself. I can't remember. I'm so young at that point. But it was after that that the differences started to show where my mom said, you can't do that. We don't do that. That was like maybe within the first 2 weeks of school. I didn't understand why. I had no idea. Okay. And then within that same year, kids in the class would have birthday parties, and at some point I must have received a message from my mom, you can't do that. Again, not understanding why. And I couldn't articulate to other people why this was an issue if I was asked. I remember one very vivid memory where one of my classmates was having a birthday party. At that point, I must have received a message from my mom. You can't do that. You can't sing happy birthday. You can't take a cake or a piece of cake or anything. So when the teacher came around with the cupcakes, I said, no, thanks. I'm on a diet. And I'm all of 5 years old when I
Oh.
say this because I had no other
Oh
idea.
no.
I had no clue what else to say. I said, no, thanks. I'm on a diet. And I remember the classroom just sort of
Um,
erupting in laughter about it. On a diet, what are you talking about? 5 years old, you know, and, all the
Did
kids are
you
eating.
never?
Yeah, I just remember all the kids eating their cake, and I'm on in the front of the kindergarten class had like a big carpet area in front of the classroom around the desks, and I'm just sort of doing like these somersaults and cartwheels on the carpet, not doing anything else.
Did you never get to have a birthday party as a child?
Not a party per se. I remember some of my other relatives, like extended relatives, my older sister. Sometimes they would have like a cake because they knew when my birthday was. I didn't even know when my birthday was until I was about maybe 7 years old. I had no idea. I remember my sister one time gave me like a cake. It was a little chocolate cake with, didn't have anything special on it. It was just a single cake with a single candle. And that, things like that. Sometimes I would get cards from other relatives who knew my birthday and they would write like nice things, but I never had a party, no.
So what else marked your childhood as different than your peers?
There was that, and then there was the holiday celebrations, which was a big thing because JWs are very well known for not doing any of the traditional holidays like Christmas, Easter, Halloween, even Thanksgiving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of those
Valentine's
things.
Day,
None of that. None of that.
July 4.
None of that. Not a single holiday. Not a
Do
single
you have your
holiday.
own holidays?
The only holiday I would say that we had is, as a matter of fact, it always coincides with Passover, um, which what we called Passover, but not celebrated the same way as a Jewish Passover. It was the death of Jesus. So that particular day, which was always followed on the Jewish calendar, I think it's the 14th of Nisan, that particular night was always observed. So we would gather at sunset on that particular night, whatever day it fell on, whatever day on the calendar it fell on, and it would be an observance of Jesus' Last Supper. And that was it. That was pretty much the only holiday we had, if you could call it that.
Was it a nice celebration? Like
It
a big
was
feast?
not a feast. I mean, it's not like we had dinner at the observance. What we would observe was matzahs and a cup of wine, and sort of just pass it around just to remember that this was the Last Supper. So every person in the whoever was attendance got these items passed to them, and we would just handle it and pass it to the next person, and just an observation like that. And then there was more speech, more than anything else, more proselytizing, because oftentimes the members who were in attendance would bring family or other friends that they had
Um,
invited. So it was always an opportunity to invite them and be a part of the faith. This is the only event that I remember my father ever going to, pretty much. He kind of went every year to that. He only went to that event, and that was it. Um,
he
so it was
didn't
very
complain
often.
about the he didn't complain about the proselytizing.
There were times when he would criticize it. He goes, this is supposed to be about Jesus. Why are they making such a big commercial about it to join their little group, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, sometimes he would complain and criticize what was said, but he would go. He would still go.
Are your parents still together?
Well, my father passed about 15 years
Oh,
ago.
I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
okay.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
But my parents remained married the whole time they were together, almost 40 years. So
Oh, wow. Do you mind giving me a crash course on what the Jehovah's Witness faith is?
sure, if I can articulate it well. It's a Christian based faith. Um, they believe in a singular God. It's not like the traditional mainstream Christian where there's a triune God, a God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They don't believe in the Trinity. So they're a singular God faith. They believe in Jesus as far as Jesus being a created being. They do believe he's the Son of God and that he died for our sins, but they don't believe that he's part of the Godhead. That in his pre-human life, he existed in heaven as an angel only. They actually believe he was Archangel Michael, and they share that with actually, I believe, the Adventists, because they actually come from they come from a similar background. They came from a group of people known as the Millerites. From the mid 19th century, there was a group of people who were awaiting for Jesus to come back to Earth at a certain time at a specific day, and then it didn't happen. So from there, the groups fractured and split up and became either Adventists or JW. And I think there was a third offshoot of that as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. But in the late 1800s, around 1879, around there was a founder of this JW religion, a guy named Charles Taze Russell, who founded this group. I believe he was a member of the Adventists. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but he split off and created this splinter group. They were known as the International Bible Students, and they still exist to this day. But they splintered off, created a group. He started heralding this another date for the arrival of Jesus, the presence of Jesus, which was supposed to be, I believe, 1914. When that didn't happen, I think his group also disintegrated a little bit, but they never totally disappeared. Off the top of my head, I think there was another person who sort of absorbed what remained of the original Russellite people and then founded, like in the 1930s, the Jehovah's Witnesses. And that's what we know today as the Jehovah's Witnesses. I was just going to say that, their faith is based on a history of predicting the end of the world. Some people call them an apocalyptic cult, end of the world cult, non-mainstream. Even though they say they're Christian, most mainstream Christians do not believe they're Christian because they don't hold on to I guess what you might call the orthodox beliefs of Christians, like things that you must believe to be a Christian or considered a Christian, they don't believe. So they're not really from the view of other Christians viewed as Christian, but JWs will always say that they're Christian because they believe in Jesus.
The part about JW that's most striking to me is the missionizing, the proselytizing, which seems very core part, meaning we see such overt efforts here in New York City. I see people from JW in the train station, in places standing for hours and trying to share their faith. And I have such a hard time even understanding what's happening there. Can you explain why they are investing so much in spreading the faith?
This ties into their belief about the end of the world, the final battle of God against Satan, I guess you could say, the Battle of Armageddon. Their missional work is to I guess you could say, warn people that this is an event that's imminent. So they are very, very committed to getting the message out that this is going to happen. You must be a part of this particular group in order to be saved. Otherwise, God's wrath is against you and you will be destroyed at Armageddon. So their work is to get that message out. And they're very, again, committed to it because within the organization, there's a belief that if you don't do this, if you don't warn your friends, your neighbors, your family that this is going to happen and they die, it's going to be your fault that they die at God's hands. So that is where you see so many JWs pouring hours and hours and hours. And I'll tell you, my mom at this point, she's 87 years old. She cannot leave the house. Hardly. She hardly leaves the house. She spends hours writing letters with this message. She'll spend her own money on stamps, envelopes, paper, because that's how she has to do it. She doesn't have the option of going out anymore because she physically can't. But yet she will still dedicate all the time that she can to, and she'll pick names and numbers out of a phone book, out of a phone directory, anywhere she can get it, and just write letters to random people. And she writes them by hand, sometimes 2-3 pages at a time, and sends them out. And there are times when she hands me a stack of envelopes. She goes, are you going by the post office by chance? Sure, I'll be out. Here. And she'll hand me a big bag full of like 20, 30 envelopes of letters, which I'm sure people, once they receive them, they just rip it up. But that's what she does.
I have gotten actually some of them, and I was taken by how beautiful the handwriting was. Who still writes by hand such long notes?
Yeah.
And also, I try not to be judgmental of other people's faith, but it makes me incredibly sad. Like I can't help feeling incredibly sad for anyone who has this faith. It sounds to me like a sad faith.
To me, when I think about it, it is because I remember just this past holiday season, on a day where most people are just with their families, Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, whatever. My mom's just sort of sitting in her chair, watching TV, yeah, it's kind of sad. And, I think the most active JW, unless they have a lot of family members who are part of the faith with them, they're pretty lonely people. It's what I've observed. They don't make friends because they can't. The JW culture is very much, you're in the world, but you're not a part of the world. So you can't make friends with people that easily. You can't really have that much of a social life. Their belief is that, you're here and everybody else is there and you got to stay here, so, yeah.
I see.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying about how sad it is, because it kind of is. It kind of is.
Yeah. I'm sure people get meaning out of it. I don't mean to belittle anyone's faith. It
Right.
just is hard for me to not take away that impression. I'm just sharing honestly how I feel about it. Um, A lot of people actually like to draw comparisons between insular sub-religious groups in the United States, like the Hasidic community and the one that I come from, and the JWs. And I find it to be very much not parallels, because the Hasidic community I come from, everyone is born into it, and there
Right.
isn't missionizing. And with JW, there's a vast number of converts, and there's something about the culture of converts and the culture of proselytizing that to me feels totally foreign. Can you speak to what it felt like for you?
What it felt like for me as someone who was born in.
Yeah, and be surrounded by converts who are missionizing. Were
Right.
you aware of it? What was the culture of people in the group? Was it
I
like
don't
a bunch of salespeople all around you that's like everyone trying to sell their faith?
I don't think I was really that much aware of it. When I was a child, I was born in, and I don't know. I guess I assumed everybody around me was too, up until a certain point. And then as I grew up and I became more aware, I realized no, people sometimes come in from other faiths. Um, you know, it was hard to distinguish for me because I again, and I'm around a lot of children who are close to my age, or yeah, like my peers. Everybody was born in, because you're a child. I don't remember ever meeting a child who wasn't, at least as far as their parents being in the group. If it was a child for somebody who was preparing to enter the group, then that was different. Because now this child is you know not born in, but they're very young. So they're just going to go along with what their parents say. I don't remember being aware of, converts like that. I just assumed everybody was the same. And as far as everybody being a salesperson, yeah, to a degree, because you had to be, and part of our weekly meetings was exactly that, getting prepared week by week by week, how to make a door presentation, a door, at the door, talking to people, talking to complete strangers, how to talk to them on the street, how to talk to them waiting for a bus or a train. That was a big part of the culture. And every week, I think our meeting week was Tuesdays for that. You were just dedicated to learning how to do that. And you even carried with you, I remember carrying a small book with me on how to do this effectively, or what they considered effectively, and how to answer objections. Sometimes I remember this one book I had, I can't remember the title of it, but I had to carry it with me, and it would create, the book had like scenarios, sample scenarios. Let's say you're at the door and somebody says to you, I'm a Muslim. So you go to this book and you look in the book, page 200 something, how to talk to a Muslim. And it gives you a sample speech. Somebody says, I'm Jewish.
Wow.
You go to page 101, how to talk to somebody who's Jewish,
What
and
do you say?
yeah, it gives you a little sample speech of what to say, and what scripture specifically might speak to that person.
Ah,
So yeah, that was the culture. That was the life in when you were in. Um, for people who were like my father, who was more like on the periphery, you would have the Sunday meetings, which were kind of tailored towards the outside in case somebody came in to visit for the first time. They didn't, the leadership didn't want to bombard people with too much JW speak. They try to make it
mm,
as a normal Sunday worship service at the beginning. It was usually a two-part service. The first hour was like a normal worship. You think you're going to a Sunday sermon. But then the second part of it is we're getting now into studying some doctrine, so then it would get a little bit deep. But the whole goal of it was to get people who were interested a little bit more interested, and to try to push them a little bit to become members.
wow. How often did you go to the assembly hall?
So the assembly hall in Monroe specifically, that was usually twice a year, because the facility itself had to be shared with many, many different congregations. So I think our circuit, and a circuit is a group of congregations just piled together into a group. So I think our group was assigned to go in April and in October of each year. I remember going around those times, sometimes April, sometimes May, sometimes October, sometimes November. That was the usual routine, and it was Saturdays and Sundays usually. Sometimes it was just Saturday, but most of the time it was both Saturday and Sunday.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Mount Vernon, so
Oh, you grew up in Mount Vernon.
yeah, I've
Got it.
lived here
Okay.
for a good time, and to travel from here to Monroe, we even though my mother could drive at that point, she wouldn't take the car. So the congregation would charter a bus to take a large group
Yeah.
of people who didn't have cars. So I remember riding with her on the bus. It was usually like an hour, hour and a half trip, depending on road conditions, I guess.
Did you look forward to it?
I did. That's why when you brought up this topic and I saw your blog, I immediately lit up because I think for me, that was usually the highlight of the year. Um, my mom would say, "We're going to Monroe." Oh, great. You know, I don't remember anything outstanding as far as the programming, but I just liked getting out of the city, because where I live is pretty urban. And even in Mount Vernon, it's pretty urban. And to me, I'm like, oh, I'm going to this country area, and get to be outside and breathe fresh air. And I enjoyed it, just for that reason alone. For me, it was like a highlight, especially because we went at the nicest part of the year too. In April, when it's becoming spring, and then in October, where you get to see the leaves and the autumn kick in. That to me was like it was almost like a mini resort, you know, and it was really nice. I always enjoyed it.
How long was the service session?
It was day long. It was an entire day. The programming started as early as 9 a.m. We would get there much earlier than that because it was customary for us anyway to have breakfast. The actual facility itself had a kitchen and a large cafeteria. And in the early part of my years, like when I was a child, they actually served hot food. So we would go and purchase, sandwiches, breakfast items, pancakes, coffee, bagels, all that good stuff. And lunch also was a hot meal. Usually it was chicken and rice, baked ziti, and then they had an ice cream machine. It was nice. Then they switched that from being hot food to just commercial, I guess, commercially prepared sandwiches, stuff that was already just cold sandwiches, which was still okay, you know. But the programming
Mm.
would be the entire day. Saturday was like usually starting around 9 a.m. Program would start 9:30ish, and we would continue until 4 o'clock, 5. And then Sunday was a little bit shorter. We would start around 9 and be done by maybe 3 o'clock. And then that was it.
Did you sleep over back at home or in the area?
For me, we slept at home. We didn't have the option of staying at an area hotel. Some people did stay at an area hotel, but for us, that wasn't an option.
Got
So
it. So during service as a young child, did you get to run around the grounds? Because I remember it being beautiful grounds.
I did. When it was nice and I wanted to go outside, absolutely. Again, that was like one of the highlights because during the lunch break was usually about maybe an hour, maybe longer. I always went outside, and I remember sitting by the fountains because there was a little area right in front that had like this fountain and this pool and the gardens. And yeah, there was always a lot of kids too. So we would just make like these little racetracks going around the parking lot, and then to the back, to the rear was just like wooded area, if I remember right. Come back and forth, and it was a very large building too. So there was a lot to cover. By the time you walked around that building once, that's it. You're pretty much done, and you could go back inside and get started again.
What do you remember about the Hasidic community that neighbored the building?
So I remember when I was very young, it was just all open space. It didn't seem like there was anybody there or nobody that I paid attention that closely. As time went on, I started seeing children And I remember looking, and boys particularly, and I saw the boys with the side curls. And I looked
Curl.
at that and I
Yeah.
said to my mom, Mom, who are these people? Why do they dress like that? She goes, Oh, those are Jewish people. And I didn't know what Jewish people meant. Whatever, I'm such a young kid. But I remember seeing a lot of children. And then every year that I went and I returned to these conventions, it just seemed like there were more and more and more. And then we started seeing houses starting getting built and come up. And then at one point, I think I was maybe about 12, I'll say, early teenage years. I remember coming up the road when, as usual, on the bus that we rode on. And as we approached the building, I looked off over to the side of the road, and now I'm seeing like a development. I said, Well, that wasn't there before. How did that just show up all of a sudden? It seemed to just prop up overnight. And it was very curious to me how it just popped up overnight. I'm like, this was all empty space. And now there's buildings, there's houses. At one point also, I saw at the entrance, I remember, I think we took part of Route 6 to get into the entrance. I can't remember 100%, but right at that point where you turned and got off of Route 6, all of a sudden I see a chicken farm. I go, chicken farm, what is this? There's chickens.
Mm.
And I love farms, so I was immediately curious about that. I said, "Oh, do they really have chickens?" I go, "I want to go see the chickens," you know.
But you're
But
in the bus.
yeah, I was in the bus and just driving by, and I'm like, "There's a chicken farm now," and now there's this. Now I'm seeing more vehicles, and I'm seeing people actually walking on the side of the road. What's going on? I didn't. It just seems so odd to me, and every year there were more and more, and now I'm starting to see adults. And then at one point I saw women, and I see the women, and to me they were just normal women. I didn't see anything unusual or peculiar. But my mom one day, she nudges me in the elbow. She goes, "You know what those women do? They shave their heads." I go, "What?
Wow.
What are you talking about?" I go, "What are you talking about? They shave their heads. Why do they do that?" She goes, "They have to do that. They have to shave their heads and then they put on a wig." I go, that to me was just so odd. I said, "Well,
Wow.
I didn't know anything about it." But
Yeah, it does sound odd.
yeah, I mean, I was curious, but at the same time, I wasn't like, I didn't find it like repugnant, or I wasn't like, ew, like, who are these people? It was funny because even at that young age, or whatever age I was when I started realizing these things, I said, these people seem to be different. I'm different too.
Mm.
So I guess we're two different groups of people being different together in the same
Yeah.
place. I think at one point that realization hit me. I go, they're different. We're in the same place being different from everybody else, because I
Yeah.
knew you guys were different. I was like, I knew these people are different, but they're living together in a community, whereas we're different, but we're living out in the world because we have to.
Yeah.
So there was sort of like that realization at some point.
Wow. Anything else you remember from your time coming to Monroe, which is the town that Kiryas Joel is in?
I just have very fond memories of it. To me, it was like almost, and I still think I feel this way to a degree. I feel like it's a spiritual place. It's like a sacred place. So when I see, and I haven't been there in a long time, but I gather that it's very different now. Now it's very developed, and it seems like there's a lot more going on. I still think it has that core of spirituality built into it, where it's like, this place shouldn't be touched. This place should be, and it doesn't matter if it's JW who's there. I said this place has a little magic to it. So when I think of it, it's like it touches me. It touches me, and I go, I hope it stays that way. I hope these folks that are living there now never leave. Because
I
that'll
hear
always,
you.
yeah, I'll make that association always, and I go, I hope it doesn't change. I hope it stays that way.
Yeah. There's something about a very profound, special childhood memory, how much we don't want it to physically disappear. For me, going back to Kiryas Joel and seeing how incredibly developed it is, buildings that are so tall, they'd never build more than 2.5 stories in my childhood. And now there are billboards. It's so hard for me to see it because it overwrites my memories of a charming, surreal, otherworldly place that I grew up in.
That describes my feeling too, because to me it was otherworldly. And especially as I knew it when there was nothing, literally nothing around you,
Yeah,
and then little by little it was building up. Yeah, I get
yeah,
that. I totally understand that.
yeah. When did you stop going to the Kiryas Joel, the Monroe Hall?
I stopped attending around 1997. That's the last time I remember being there physically at the same location. After that, I heard, because at that point I was no longer even involved with the witnesses really, but I heard that the place had been sold. I assumed that it was going to be sold to the nearby you know, village people there, the Orthodox, the Hasidim community. I assumed, I was like, oh, they're going to make that place into a synagogue right quick. And I said, it's a perfect place for it, and that's what I assumed. But I never followed up and found out what happened. It was only until recently that I found out, oh, they took down the building and it was abandoned. I go, that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, it was turned into condos. It's totally developed.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Can I ask why you decided to leave uh JW?
Um, I think I want to say it was for some profound reason, but it really wasn't. When I was in college, I
Where did you
and
go?
I went to SUNY Old Westbury on Long Island. I for the first time I connected myself to the internet. It was there at college. And one of the first things I started to research was Jehovah's Witnesses, because at that point I already had a
Mm.
little bit of discomfort with specifically with the lifestyle. At that point, I'm an adult, right? I'm like 20, 21, 22 years old. I'm like, I want to live my own life. I'm tired of just pleasing my mother here, being a part of this group. I want to live my own life and do my own thing. I didn't see a future for myself in that organization because there's only so much you could do, especially as a female. There's really not much you could do other than maybe get married and that's it. I said, what if I want to do something else? While I'm in college, I start researching a little bit, and then somehow, in the very early days of the internet, there's a lot of information out there about this group that I never knew. I never knew that ex-members wrote books and exposed a lot of, I guess you could say, high-level dysfunction within the leadership of the organization. There were scandals that were covered up that I never knew about. And once I realized that all of this was happening, and I guess you could say the scales fell off my eyes, and I started to see them for who they really are. So I decided not to be involved anymore. I said, why should I be bound to this group? Why should I continue to be bound? I want to just be my own person and live my own life. But I don't know if you know, leaving is never just an option. If you remember, it's hard to leave. And I tried to leave quietly, but you can't just leave quietly.
What does it take to leave?
You can't really leave quietly.
You can't just stop attending services?
You can, but then you can expect people calling you, asking what's going on. Why are you not attending? You know, Sometimes the leadership, the elders specifically, will try to find reasons. You may be even followed to see if you're doing something what they consider wrong, like especially in the case of young people, what they try to look for is evidence of, anything wrong, morally wrong. Like, does he have a boyfriend, a girlfriend? Is there evidence of premarital sexual activity? Is there evidence of
Which is
smoking?
not allowed?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So, they look for things
Smoking is
like that.
also not allowed?
Smoking is not allowed. Drinking in moderation, they don't encourage it, but it's not prohibited. It's just that, look, they don't look at it well. Drunkenness, they don't look at it very well. Smoking is definitely not allowed. In the
Is it
case of,
true that
go ahead.
is it true that blood transfusions are not allowed?
That is true. That is absolutely true.
Even when it can save a life?
Even if it saves a life. Yeah. They strictly prohibit that. Um,
Why?
they claim that so they go back to the scriptures for that. Um, I think it's in Leviticus where it says, blood represents life, or life is in the blood. And they say that, taking a blood transfusion is akin to eating blood, which is prohibited by the Old Testament,
Mm,
the old scriptures. They translate it, or they interpret it to mean that a transfusion is like eating blood. So
mm,
that's why they prohibit it.
I see. As a young adult who was raised in the faith, did you feel that the restrictions of the faith were limiting your ability to enjoy life?
Definitely. Absolutely. And again, innocent things, because it's not like I was a wild child in any way. I was pretty athletic. I wanted to play basketball, baseball, do all those things. No, for no reason other than you can't. It's just not, it's just not allowed as a child. Um, Normal things that normal children do, making friends in the neighborhood. Um, One memory I have, when I was maybe about 8 years old, I befriended a girl in my class who was new to the school. She had moved from New Jersey. And I don't know, I think some of the other classmates didn't like her too much, but I liked her and I wanted to be her friend. So she was kind enough to like invite me to her house one Saturday. And my mom made such a huge deal of that. And she goes, how are you going to go to some stranger's house like that? She's not one of us. I don't know how she eventually relented and gave in, but I remember her giving me so much grief about it. And you shouldn't be her friend. She's not one of us. You can't be her friend. And then when I finally did get to go to her house, my mom gave me this whole set of instructions. Don't eat the food there. Don't do this. Don't do that. So yeah, it was very limiting in that sense. And it was hard.
What freedoms did you get once you decided to leave the church?
At that point, I was an adult. I could do whatever I want. So
Like, how did you express your newfound life?
one of the first things I did was register to vote.
Really? You're not allowed to vote if you're
You're
a
not,
JW?
Voting is not allowed. So one of the first things I did as evidence that now I'm free, I went and I registered to vote. That was like maybe the very first thing I
Miriam,
did.
you're a wild child. Wow. This is a scandal.
I know, for them it is. For them it is.
Wow.
And I didn't even know what I was voting for or why, but I said, but now I could do this, so I'm going to do it. And I just, whatever, I voted for whoever. I didn't even know why I was voting for them, but I just did.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What else did you do?
At that
Like, do you have
point,
any similar memories like that?
let's see, there was voting. I went on a date for the first time at age 22. uh,
Nice.
and it was with a man. He was older than I was, but he was also an ex-member. So he was also experiencing like something he didn't do growing up, and it was only one date. It was awkward, but yeah, it was like, wow, I went out on a date at 22 years old for the first time.
Why didn't you go on dates as a JW member?
So they see dating as something only to do if you're ready to get married. They don't arrange
Mhm.
marriages, but they don't really encourage open dating either. So if you're
Mm.
seen partnered up with, and of course that person can only be a JW. So dating outside of the religion is strictly not allowed. But if they see a young person talking or potentially interested in somebody as, to date, they're kind of like, all right, you're not going to date for too long. They're expecting you to get married. It's not like, all right, today I'm going to date this person and tomorrow another person. No, you don't do that. If you're seen with
Mhm.
somebody, it's considered, all right, you're going to get engaged next week, and maybe by this time next year you're married, and that's it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
How did you come to get married to your former husband? Was he also JW at JW?
No, he was never involved with that faith. I met him just randomly on the street one day, and we dated and eventually got married. And
Wow.
he was maybe only the second person I dated in my life after the first guy that I told you about. He was like the
Wow.
second, and then eventually we ended up getting married.
Dating is hard. You don't realize until you actually do it how hard it is, especially when you have baggage of not experiencing it as a young person.
I think that's still my number one issue because I just don't know how to
Yeah.
do it. I don't know how to do it.
It's not my number one issue because I don't even bother to do it. It's just too much work.
I don't
It's so
either.
much work.
At this
Yeah.
point, I don't want to either. I'm like, I'm 50 years old. Why am I going to bother now
Yeah,
at this point?
I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah.
I bet that people would call us for feeling this way sad the way I call your mom sad. And I think
Yeah.
it's wrong to project our own judgment on other people. I feel bad to call your mom sad, and I feel it's wrong to call us sad, but it's sometimes you just have to do your own thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm learning. I mean, I'm still learning and I'm trying to understand a lot of things, and I'm still trying to understand myself even,
Yeah.
outside, understand myself as, yeah, just as I am and not try to be somebody I'm not or try to accept other people's filter of me as though they're true. They may
Yeah.
not be true. And
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they aren't true. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's been a
It's
long
hard work.
process. It's hard work. It
Yeah.
is.
It's
It
hard
is.
work. It's hard work. I'm a big believer that as humans, we have all sorts of complexities and challenges, no matter our backgrounds. And my belief is it's okay. We work through them as we go through life. It's what makes us human, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
So you wanna you wanna tell me what it was like to actually leave the church, that it ended up being such a big deal?
I tried to leave quietly and not make a big deal of it. I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore. I didn't want to participate in their weekly meetings. I didn't want to go to the assembly anymore. There were a lot of things I just didn't want to do, especially as far as like the proselytizing, because I wasn't good at it anyway. And I always felt like this pressure on me, like, you got to bring in people. You got to reach out and grab somebody and make sure they come in and that they become a member, they get baptized. Otherwise, you're responsible for them. I didn't want to live under that pressure anymore. I didn't want to pretend anymore. I was getting tired of those weekend programming sessions, especially the longer ones, because the ones we had in Monroe were short, even though they were weekend long. We would have larger assemblies during the summer every year that were like 3 and 4 days long. I got tired of it because those were a big hassle, and now you're in this arena. When I was in, I think at one point we used to meet at Yankee Stadium. So imagine Yankee Stadium filled top to bottom with all these people. You're in a stadium with 40, 50,000 people, 4 days. It was ridiculous. So I got tired of that. It was a big hassle. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. I said, this is very restricting. At that point, as a young adult, especially, I didn't want to deal with, I was trying to look for work. I'm trying to, get a career started. Now I have to demand at my place of employment, hey, by the way, I have to leave early on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights because I have these meetings. I can't work for you on the weekend. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I go, who does that? I'm like, if I'm getting started in a career, I'm going to throw myself in. And if I have to work weekends, I'll work weekends. I don't want to have my agenda already filled up before I even get a chance to prove myself at an employer. You know what I mean? I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was like, if my employer needs me on Saturday, I want to be available Saturday. If it turns out I only like working the weekends, I want to just work the weekends, If I want to work just nights, I want to work just nights. Maybe I like that. I found that too overwhelming as a young person to have to navigate. So that's when I decided, I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm tired of it, and I'm only believing what I'm told to believe. Maybe I want to think for myself too. Maybe I want to explore things on my own, you know, on my own terms. Whether I have faith or I don't have faith, I want to make my own decision about that. My mother got to make that decision. Why can't I? You know,
And how did people react to that?
they didn't react too well. The elders and the leadership, especially, they said, well, you know what the consequences are, right? I
They
go,
called you?
yeah, eventually they did call me when I had missed enough meetings. They called me and they decided to meet with me. And I told them pretty much what I told you. I said, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. What am I doing it for? And they're like, well, you're doing it for eternal life, don't you know? And I didn't say anything at that point, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what do you know? You know? So yeah, it became a little bit of a thing. Again, I wanted to just slink away and be left alone. But inside of the group, you'll always have members who are very, I guess you could say, nosy, and they want to find out, why aren't you there? What are you doing? What's going on? And I would get those calls, and these were people who had known me from birth, much older than I am, adults, especially in my culture, I'm Hispanic. You don't just talk to adults any old way. I wanted to say mind your own business, but you can't just say that. So I would just say something like, I'm working, I'm just doing my own thing. I don't have a lot of time, but maybe I'll catch up again. I'll catch up soon. Don't worry, you'll see me again. Yeah, right. It didn't happen. So it was tough, and emotionally I was having a hard time having those conversations. There's only so many times you could say, I'll see you soon. And then they call again next week. So how soon is soon? Are you coming this week? Am I going to see you this week? I'll see you soon. Next time they call, same questions. It was getting to be a bit much. And that's when I made a decision. You know what? I'm just going to have to make a break and let the fallout happen.
Wow. Did you have support from anyone?
No, I did the whole thing on my own. I guess, well, I don't want to say completely alone, because my father, since he wasn't a believer, he didn't care. So I was living at home. He just expected me to keep living at home. I've heard of stories of children or young adults who, when they walk away, they get thrown out of their homes and they have nowhere to go, or they end up, in bad situations. I was very fortunate and blessed that, I didn't have to deal with that. And even though my father didn't openly say, I'm here, he sort of let me know, you're not going anywhere. Doesn't matter what your mother says. You live in this house, you belong here, and you stay here as long as you want to stay here. But yeah, I really didn't have, I didn't know any ex members. I didn't know of any ex groups like that. Again, it was the very early days of the internet, so you didn't really have that big community of exes yet. So yeah, it's kind of like I left and now I'm navigating the world on my own. Okay, I'll do the best that I can with what I got at 21, 22 years old. But it was tough. It wasn't easy. I felt like I was very behind everybody else. And I had to be careful. I didn't want to seem like I was too vulnerable either, because I knew in the back of my mind, there are people who are like predators. They look for people who are very green, naive. And I'll admit, I was pretty naive, you know, but I didn't want to make myself a target.
Do you feel like you've built a new life that has in some ways allowed you to start over since your JW years?
I'm getting there. I definitely, I think me personally, I have this tendency to sort of shove things to the back of my mind and not deal with them. So those first couple of years, I would say that first decade when I left, I was just sort of just living without really processing what I went through. Just doing a daily grind. Again, I got married and everything. I was just sort of marching on, marching on. But then in the back of my mind, I always had these things that had happened, and I would have clashes with my ex because he didn't understand what I went through, and I didn't know how to explain it to him. I tried to explain to him, hey, my mom is a part of this group. I didn't grow up knowing certain things. I didn't know about holidays. I didn't know about the same things he knew about. He just took it for granted that in my house we always had Christmas. And then one year Christmas comes along, our first Christmas comes along, and he's like, well, why haven't you put up a tree? I go, I've never had a tree in my life. I wouldn't even know how to decorate one, you know? He's like, well, why don't you have a party? We never had parties. We don't do those things. So there was always a little bit of friction between me and him because of that. And I tried to explain to him, we just don't do those things. And my ex, he was like very outgoing and very extroverted. So, and he was like, I'm going to solve this. We're going to get everybody together and we're just going to do it. We're just going to do it. I go, good luck. I know my family. I know my people. They're not just going to go along with it because you say so, but go ahead and make the attempt, And sometimes that would result in a lot of hurt feelings because he wouldn't get the reception he expected. And I'd be like, I try to warn you, but that's just how it is. Yeah. So I think the first decade was just a matter of just processing and trying to understand what had happened. It's a funny thing during this whole time, and I know this is very common with JWs who leave, they just completely turned their back on religion and anything to do with religion. I may have done that for about a year where I just said, you know what, I'm an atheist. That didn't last too long. Even though I had left, I still felt like I needed God, and I remember going to and I don't even know what kind of church it was. It was just a church service. It seemed nice. So I walked in and it happened to be Easter. And I was just so emotional during the service. Like I couldn't stop crying. And I didn't know why. I was like, why am I crying? Why am I so emotional?
Wow.
So it took a while. And from that point forward, I was sort of like on this journey of trying to find out who I am, what my religious expression is. I knew it was going to be Christian at all times, but where? And I think I'm still trying to figure that out. Trying to figure out that identity.
Do you have any idea? What are you leaning towards?
Well, about a decade ago, I did join a church. I was baptized and I became a Presbyterian, and I did that for a while. I went through that, and I think I would still consider myself one. I'm just not very clear on if I want to continue doing that, being a Presbyterian or just accepting. I don't know if I want to be ecumenical and maybe try different churches. I don't know. That's still up in the air for me, I'm still trying to figure that out. Yeah, I have time.
Yeah.
And
You have time. You have time. Well, Miriam, thank you so much for sharing so much, so openly. This was really, really fascinating. I don't think I've ever really understood the witnesses very much. I did a little bit of research, but I feel like I learned a lot about this faith group and very different from anything I've learned about before. So I really appreciate you sharing and teaching me so much. And I feel like we're not too far in age. Our paths have crossed in our lives, sort of in our early days. I probably was the kid on the other side of the fence when you were driving into Monroe, which is just the most charming thought in my mind.
I find it charming too, because like I said, when I started seeing kids, I was like, wow, these are different kids and I'm a different kid. So we're being different together in the same place.
I love that. I'm going to leave it on that note. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you.
And thank you also to everyone on YouTube, the viewers and the podcast listeners as well. I appreciate all of you, and bye-bye.